Hi there, you're listening to the Bigfoot Society podcast, and I'm Jeremiah Byron. Every week I talk to individuals who have experienced Sasquatch in some way or another, so you won't want to miss an episode. Make sure you're subscribed on the platform that you're listening to, and share this episode with a friend. It does not cost a thing, and it helps the show continue to grow. If you'd like to hear Bigfoot Society episodes early and ad-free, you can do so by becoming a Patreon supporter or a YouTube channel member. Links to those are in the show notes. In Bigfoot Society, I've taken far too much of your time so far, so let's get on with the show. Hey, real quick, this is a disclaimer before this episode, as it does have adult themes in it. And as a parent, I want to make sure that if you are listening to this with your child and you don't want them to have the knowledge that they would have in a high school health class, then this is not the episode for them. Again, you make the call yourselves, but I just want to make sure that parents were aware of what is coming up in this episode. Thank you. All right, Bigfoot Society, I got the privilege of talking to Dom. He's a lobster fisherman from Maine, and he contacted me about some really interesting things that he has experienced over the years. But how's it going today, Dom?
It's going good, man. I'm really happy to be able to share the story and glad that everybody else does too. So thanks for giving it a platform and a voice. We all appreciate it. Thank you, man.
Oh, absolutely. It's one of my highlights of the day is able to, after the kid goes to bed, able to go into the recording studio and call up another person and get their story out there. So I appreciate you coming on from Maine.
Very familiar. It's the same way for me. As soon as the kid's asleep, then it's like time to listen to figure out what stories are out there, see if there's a new podcast on, and I understand. So
Absolutely. Dom, you know what? I'm going to give the reins over to you. And I'm going to let you lead the way, Dom.
All right, man. Thank you very much. My name is Dom. I am from Colorado, but I live in Maine. I do a little bit of commercial logging. I also work on lobster boats. I'm always trying to be in the wilderness, but I had two experiences when I was living in Colorado that both of them wasn't just me there. I had somebody with me both times that saw the same thing, and the way people react to it is definitely different, but it was terrifying and it changed the way I looked at everything. And I see a lot of similarities hearing other people's stories, but I guess I'll just start with my introduction into Bigfoot in general. Living in Colorado, working in the woods and playing around in the woods, people always talk about it, or somebody has a story here or there, and I had people that would pass by theories about what they thought these things were, and people would say maybe they're some interdimensional thing or something that was an experiment or didn't evolve, or I don't know myself. And I think most people go through a phase where they might be interested in those things if they live in a mountainous rural area. And I knew that there was always big things in the woods, and I was always out there. I grew up on a ranch, and we were always working with cows, working with horses, and always in the woods and always aware there's a lot of mountain lions, a lot of bear, maybe not a lot of bear, but there's bear. And the brown bear can be nasty. But in a place like Colorado, there's definitely the area for something big like that to live. And I was surprised. It was when I really, when I lived in different parts of the state, I think that if I was Bigfoot, maybe I'd live way up in the mountains. But where this I guess there's some real wild places. But my first experience was when I was living in Grand Junction, Colorado. I used to go for drives with friends that had Corvettes or whatever. We used to take 141 up towards Gateway. And it was a pretty fun canyon to drive up. And you can check out the stars because there's big canyon walls and no light pollution from anywhere. And there's always a spot that we would go check out. A friend of mine showed me that was next to the road, and it was in a field. We just hopped the fence and crossed a little creek, and we'd walk through this field, and it looked like a school desk, only it was made of concrete. It was a really strange thing, and we always contemplated on what this thing was, but it became a spot I always liked to check out and wanted to come back. And it was just a way out there place that we could get alone. Nobody was there, and it was just a cool place to take a breath and take a walk away from society. And this time, like I said, I was living in Grand Junction, and I had a neighbor named Joe that was a friend of mine, a construction worker. And him and his wife got in a fight, so we decided to go for a drive. And I said, I know a cool place to blow steam off. Let's go check out this place up the canyon. So we went ripping up the canyon and finally got to this place. And we hopped the fence and made it through the field. And I literally said, here it is. I was about to say, here is this weird, strange desk I was saying that's in the middle of this field. I don't know what the hell it's for, but sure is a cool spot. Was about to get those words out, and I turned around, and this roar came out of nowhere. And I was walking towards this desk, and it was so dark, you couldn't really see much. And my friend was wearing flip-flops. Yeah, it's just the thing he did when he got home from work. He put flip-flops on all the time. So I could hear his flip-flops walking behind me, and this roar came out. It froze me. And I could hear Joe's flip-flops running out of the field back towards the car. And the sound and the roar came at the same time. And I was turning around to look at this spot, and it was right there, just right in front of me. And I remember enough light to where I could see its head and the shape of its shoulders and its traps around its neck. I could see its muscles. And that was standing right next to me. Like, there was all the senses at that point. You could sense something was there. You could smell it. You could hear it. And the sound that it made, it sounded to me like we surprised it, or it was angry that we were there, because it was such like a shout beyond any range of any vocal capabilities that I'm a metalhead, and I've never heard anything like that. And I just, as soon as I was making sense of everything and seeing its shape and how, because I'm about 6'1", in boots, and this thing, I was looking above towards it, and I was looking up at it. It was a foot taller than me. Maybe that's a little much, but it was there. I was gone, and I just ran. We got to the car. We didn't say anything, and we drove down the canyon, and we didn't talk about it. He didn't want to talk about it or anything, and I wanted to know more. So I obviously poked around and asked questions, but it was so frightening to just turn around and something just be there. I grew up around animals. Being surprised by an animal, and you always can hear them or smell them or see them or something. And even most things in a field wouldn't be that surprising, a cow or anything. But this sound was it was the only thing that I've ever heard anything that sounded like it was those Sierra sounds. And it wasn't language or anything. It's like the guttural. It sounds like just an octave that we just can't get to. Like, it changes from some octave that humans don't have to like a shriek that we don't have. And just hearing those sounds, it gives me goosebumps every time I hear it, because it puts me right back in that spot. And it just terrified me and him. And I just was thankful that somebody else seen it with me. But I never really, I'd say something here or there, but it scared us to death. He had been around all kinds of animals, and he had too, but that was really an intense situation. And just to think that something like that was out there, you always hope. But now I didn't know what else that could be. There's elk around there, and bighorn sheep, and people have horses and cows. There's just nothing that could have been.
Dom, do you mind if I ask you a few questions about that?
Oh, yeah, go ahead, man.
Were you able to get a good look at what the creature's face looked like?
I couldn't see a profile of like a brow ridge or anything like that beyond what had been around the forehead, because of the way that I was looking at it. So I couldn't see, whether it had like a big nose or a small nose or a human face, or it was just, there wasn't a lot of hair on it, but there was some around the face, but it really didn't have the kind of hair that I thought that it would have. I don't know, it surprised me. It was bald on top. I know it sounds probably strange to say, but the more I picture it in my mind and think about it, I thought about it a million times, but it just, I really wish I could have, because I would expect it to look human, I would think. It just, there's nothing that looks like that standing in a field like that. And can make a sound like that, I don't know. But that was something standing upright and had a very large build. I'd been around big bodybuilders, and that thing was every bit as big as some of the biggest guys I've ever known.
Anything that you remember about dimensions of the creature that seemed a little weird to you, or the way it moved, or anything like that?
Like, I seen it, when I turn around and seen it, I just seen it barely move a shoulder. And I would say, like, when I compare him to like a bodybuilder, I had a friend that he's like the world's largest bodybuilder. He's 6'9" and almost 300 pounds. He was wider in the shoulders than he is. And he was huge. I would think that he would around 7 feet. My friend Aaron that I'm talking about, he's a very large guy. I would think this thing was be over 300 pounds. Just the mass that it had, just seeing shoulders like that in the traps, the muscles that go to the neck, it was big. And you could see the muscle just when you see a horse or a cow. I mean, they do have hair, but you can see that there's muscles, veins and stuff. It was it was huge.
So try to put yourself back in that situation. Can you remember what emotions you were feeling inside when you had this actually in your sights and you realized what you were looking at?
When I seen and heard it, like the sound it made, I felt it in me. And I always say, I'm not a flincher, but I was frozen. Like, I could feel it like vibrating in my body. Like it was almost like it was like moving air. And it was like, I could feel the vibration and I could feel it in my chest. And it was terror. I didn't really think this thing's going to kill me as much as I was just shocked that something was making this noise, and it was standing in the middle of a field that nobody was supposed to be in. And we were there, and I don't know, I just kept thinking that I surprised it, and I just don't know how that would have been possible. I just don't, from what I hear other people say about them, I was in shock. I was just frozen, and as soon as I turned around and ran, I remember getting to the barbed wire fence, crossing it, getting in my friend's Eclipse, and peeling out, and we were gone. I went from being frozen to just running for my life, like as fast as I could even think about it. But just, I don't know. I guess it was just really fear and shock.
Wow. It remind me again, sorry, of the year that happened.
Oh my gosh. Let's see here. I think that would have had been 2005 or 2006.
Okay.
I think I'm trying to think about when I lived right in that area. I'd have to guess around 2005, 2006. Yeah. I was living down the western slope in Grand Junction, and it was not real mountainous in that area. There is some mountains, but it's on the western slope of the Continental Divide. It's like it turns to desert right in the middle of the continent, right there, right in the Rockies. And I mean, you can wilderness, but there's a lot of mesas, and it's definitely can be wild out there.
Have you ever heard of a place called Twin Peaks Bible Camp in Grand Junction?
That's so funny, because Grand Junction is where I was living. It's where my family was ended up being based from. Yep. I actually would probably be familiar with where I was from, but I'm not familiar with that particular one. That's crazy.
Okay. So I'm just curious because there is a sighting near a Bible camp in Grand Junction as well.
Really? That's so funny. Yeah. It's called just having the Twin Peaks name is cool too. so that's mysterious also. I love that show, but that's interesting. Right. I'm going to have to look into that one and see, because I always try to see wherever I've lived all over in the U.S. and any wild places. I always ask the old people who work in the mines or people who work on the ocean or worked in the woods, like, you ever see anything strange? It's important to ask people. Those stories need to be remembered for sure. But that's crazy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because this area, like I've never really looked on a map at exactly where it was, but it was going up towards the town of Gateway, and it was up highway on Route 141. And I had two experiences. One on the other side of that Grand Valley in the town of Mesa, and it was years later, but it was. I'm gonna have to see if there was any more on that Grand Mesa, because it's the biggest flat top mountain in the world, and there's some wild places on it too. There's always rumors about stuff on that mountain. It's huge and it's flat, that's for sure.
Before we get to the second one, another question about your encounter near the interesting stone desk. When you ran back to the car with your buddy and you sped off, was there any conversation in that car, or was it nothing was said?
We did a whole lot of cursing. We mostly got to the car. Just that was pretty much the extent. And there might have been I certainly had a lot to say, but my friend that I was with, he didn't want to talk about stuff. He just wasn't one of those guys to talk. And he was really shaken up by it. It really terrified him and scared him. And he was scared and he wanted to be home. And he was the older guy. When I think around that time I was, I don't know, 19 or 20. My buddy, he's in his mid-30s. You get in a situation like that, you look at the older person and take a little strength from them what to do, or what the hell was that? You tell me. And he just was terrified, and so I just didn't push it. And I told people here and there and talked with, like I said, I'd ask people, and the people that I talked with about aliens or conspiracies and stuff that ended up being true. And there's always mysterious things in those Four Corners area, Colorado. Talk about underground bases and all kinds of stuff. And there is some very mysterious areas down there in that area, real remote places. There's tribes that disappear and stuff. But I would like to know more sightings from in that area. I hear a lot of people talking about skinwalkers and stuff like that in that area. And I've never heard anybody to my face tell me a story about a skinwalker. So I don't know. I do know that these things are real. As much as my son is real, and my daughter, and my wife, and as much as me talking to you, these things exist. I don't know how or in what form they exist in this plane. And I've talked with people about what they actually thought these were, and how we don't have a body, or there's no evidence, and whether they do bury their dead or not. I know some people really laugh this off, but one of the best conclusions that I heard somebody say came from the same person who told me that he believed that they were brought here to mine gold, but then by who, I don't know, but then they were taken back or whatever because they couldn't problem solve as well as the people, the next version or whatever. And supposedly a few of them stayed, and, as things evolved or whatever, they stayed around. I don't know how much I believe that. He also had told me that, they might be some type of being that, might exist, in another dimension that we don't have access to. That some type of, that some people might be, that vibrates in a frequency that some people just don't see. Some people just don't see deer before they jump across the road, or they don't see a snake before they step on it. And even people that are trained to see stuff don't see stuff sometimes. And I'm not saying that accounts for things, but I just really thought about that a lot when I heard people talk about what dimensions actually are and how many exist. It makes me think that there might be other things that exist in other dimensions that we might consider monsters or not, or demons or angels, or who knows. But I don't know why there's not more people coming out and saying how they actually feel, or that they've had these experiences, because I don't know. I've never really heard a lot of people say that. I thought to myself yesterday when I was thinking about if I was going to say something or not, I'm going to say something, because maybe that is. I know that people always draw some UFO Bigfoot connection, that sometimes that they see them in lights in the same spot that they see Bigfoots, and there's definitely places that are like big energy vortexes and stuff like that. So I could see something like that. I don't know. I'm sure that you've heard all kinds of different theories about it, but I always thought that was strange, but it never kept me from wanting to say something about it, because I always knew that somebody was going to say, oh, man, Dom's crazy. He's just one of those guys. He's just, of course he saw Bigfoot. I never said anything about seeing Bigfoot till I did. You know what I mean? I don't make up stuff.
So the cool thing about Bigfoot is that, and a lot of people don't like this, but there is no proven truth about the creature yet, because we have, in the fact that we don't know if it's interdimensional, we don't know if it's an ape or anything, because it hasn't been captured and it hasn't been studied. Yeah. So if someone says to you, I know 100% this is the thing, no, you don't, because it hasn't been captured and studied. Now, you may, like myself personally, I agree with NAWAC, where I think we're looking at undiscovered great ape, but like then you hear the Chestnut Ridge, Stan Gordon side of things, and you have these UFO sightings and then Bigfoot sightings right along with them. There's all sorts of stuff when it comes to Bigfoot out there in the world, for sure. But
there's definitely think that the people who see things in the sky and people who see things in the woods are the same type of person. They usually hopefully they'll say something about it. But their stories like those are really, I think that it's not like something like that would be so far-fetched. I really, in that part of Colorado, there's always been, like I said, there's talks about there being some kind of base, and people are always seeing the same types of crafts in the sky. And we literally would talk about if we thought that they were government or not. I never saw any, but I don't know. I've heard guys telling stories that I knew that everything that they said was bullshit. And this kid, he looked us in the face, and the only time I ever seen this dude be honest, he said that they're going down the highway near the Four Corners, and there's a big black V flying right down the power lines, just going right down it real slow, and everybody was stopping, looking at it, trying to take pictures and stuff, and they made him say something, and I think that's good. But yeah, in that area, there's a lot of strange stuff, and I always hope, living out here in Maine now, that I'm gonna, hear some really cool ocean stories or something. But as much as I've worked out there, I've seen some great white sharks, but nothing cool. There's no Bigfoot out there.
Nice. Hey, you never know. So you had your awesome sighting in Grand Junction area. So how long after did you have you had a sighting in, you said Mesa?
Yeah, in Mesa, in the Grand Valley, that Mesa is like, it's the biggest mountain out there. You can't miss it. It's big and flat. And it's got a powder horn ski resort up there. It's got all kinds of lakes and all kinds of wilderness. It's a beautiful place. And I'd have to say this is probably around, I think around 2009, 2010, maybe 2011. I really wish I would have tried to narrow down the years better. I'm sorry. Time flies. But yeah, up there on that Mesa, there was a house that I rented, and it was in the town of Mesa, and there were a lot of wild spots up there. I had some good friends that were awesome skiers and snowboarders, and they were always going up in these awesome, real wild places, and it was a really interesting place to be, and I really was psyched to find a place to rent up there. It's just really far from town. So I was at the end of this real long driveway, and there's a corral with nothing that was ever in it, and just a real quiet place. And up there, big mountain in the desert, nothing in the sky. You always see the stars. A real beautiful place, and I really enjoyed living up there. It's just really far. I was up there, and this girl I was seeing, we just started renting this place, and every night we'd get home, we'd be exhausted. So we finally got home at a decent time that night, decided we were gonna have a drink and go sit on the top of the truck and look at the stars, and having some drinks and looking at the stars and all that. To tell you, I've been trying to think about how I was going to tell this story, but we're about to talk about some sex for a second. So me and this girl, we had some sex up on top of the Suburban that I had, and out there just looking at the stars. And this girl I was with, she was on her period, and I don't know if it had anything to do with it, but we started hearing and breathing right next to us. And there's no animals in the corral, which is towards right where we were. And we looked, and there's standing right over there by us. It was would like to say it felt like it was right close to us, but we saw the whole damn profile of it. And it wasn't just me that saw it, so I was thankful for that. But we were terrified, and it didn't make any noise or anything. We jumped down real quick, got right in the truck, and drove right down our driveway. And we were really freaked out that we just went from not really paying attention to anything to having something potentially stalk us. It really terrified us. And our house was right there, not real far from it, 500 feet away. We got inside and we turned off all the lights and we closed the blinds, and we hadn't got any good blinds for the place. And they were these little white, you could pretty much see through them. And we were terrified it was just going to walk up the driveway. We didn't look at what it did or if it stayed there, but it was just standing there with one arm cocked and its head cocked, and that was that. And we seen it at the same time, and she screamed, and we got right down and drove the 500 feet down the driveway. What good that would do, I don't know. But we were terrified. Locking the door, we thought that it wanted to come in or would want to because it saw where we went. And it really was very strange. It's a very strange story to try to tell people about your personal life or about someone you were with too. But that time, because I didn't think about what it was or wasn't. We were shocked that something was right there. I didn't really, ever since I had that experience, I knew that damn things existed, but it really scared us. And we kind of, me and her, the thing that we thought was that because maybe she was menstruating, then maybe it smelled it. Like I said, I'm trying to figure out how I was going to put all this, but I just figured I'd just say it how it was. And the only thing, like maybe it smelled this and walked up or something. I don't know, but it terrified her. And it terrified me. But we talked about that a lot. And we talked about that even with her family. And we didn't really, the fact that it wasn't a man was, if it was just some pervert just standing there watching people, that would be, obviously you'd be enraged and want to protect whoever you're with and get out of any dangerous situations. But she clearly, I could see she looked like she was looking at a monster. And she kind of, me and her dad had kind of talked about Bigfoot before. And so it's just like, I kind of saw, someone's face being like terrified and shocked and terrified real fast. It just sheer terror. Because what do you do? Because it's, at that point, I'd already talked about with people if they were interdimensional, if it wanted to come in the house, closing the blinds and locking the door and laying on the floor so they can't look in the blinds isn't going to do any good. And I just know that's just a ludicrous story. I know so many people are going to make fun of me for that, but I don't know what part that had to play in it, but it made sense to me almost. That's like I said, when I had that experience towards up in that canyon, I wish I could have seen a face or something, because something like that, it just doesn't, look at things and see faces in them, just in trees or in leaves or in rock, something that is standing upright, that's not dragging its arms on the ground and not slouched over, you expect to look like a human. And I really would have liked to have seen it, but it's just panicking about what way anything and anybody's going to run is, I don't know. I wish I would have paid attention more about where it went, because we have someone freaking out so bad that trying to get the doors unlocked and them in and then back out and then in the house is difficult enough. Trying to figure out where something like that wants to be, it's just gonna be. But I was shocked about that too, and I feel like they just appeared in spots in my life, and I think that's weird. And I don't know if that's just what they feel like they do for other people, but like I said, I felt like I walked up and stepped on one's heel pretty much, and it was like pissed off or surprised that I did it. And that other one, it just popped up. And hearing the breath, being around big animals like cows and horses, you hear someone that has big lungs taking big breaths, like the mucus in their lungs or just whatever. You hear them breathing through their nose or their mouth, and just some real big lungs. And there was never any cows or horses in that corral or even any fields near it since I'd started renting that place. And it was just something you hear like that right away. It snaps you right out of whatever you're doing, and you look right towards what the sound is. And I didn't see a color, anything, but that didn't have anything that, like I said, the canyon, looked like that one was bald on top, but this one you could see had hair on it. It was definitely the shape of a large hairy man standing there. And I would have to say, like, dimension wise, that one is probably, looking at my son's playset out there in the back standing about 8 foot tall, I don't think that it would have been that tall. I think it was probably a little shorter than that. It was big. Something that tall, it's a big animal or whatever it is, but something like that. When you're hearing them breathe, or I hear people, telling stories about looking them in the eye or seeing steam coming off of them and looking at the hairs on their skin and seeing like the skin and the hair. I like hearing people say that, because when you're looking at something, like, people have Bigfoot cutouts in their yards all over here in Maine. They do in Colorado. But when you're looking at something that's an animal or that's alive, that's consciously looking back at you, you notice when a bird is looking at you, you're like, hey, what's up, bird? Squirrel's looking at you. Bigger animals, same thing. But something like that, you consciously looking at you, is terrifying, because usually man, woman in the woods, for the most part, you're not going to have too much trouble with something. But I just felt like both times, just like my space, all of a sudden there was something right in the space that exists around you. You can feel something is there. And I could definitely say I wasn't the only person that felt that either time. And like I said, I pester people about this all the time. And I think on a lot of my friends, when their trips to the woods, they're drinking and shit like that. And I wonder how much stuff actually goes on in the woods that people don't even get to see, because I take advantage of any time I'm out there now, just in case. But I don't know if it works like that. But these times I definitely wasn't looking for anything like that.
I'll be honest, it's not the first time that it has come up on the show. Think of one, and I had to take it out.
Yeah,
Because of the person who was telling the story requested I take it out. But you're not the first person that has brought up something similar.
I always wondered that, if it's something that, because what this looked like to me was, if they were going to procreate or something, they would probably do it like us, like just another animal, seeing another animal doing that. I just don't, I think that they would be interested in it, or wondering why they look like them, or I don't know. I was always interested that if there was more people that had that experience, because it makes sense to me too. And there's been stories of people getting drugged off and all kinds of stuff. But I don't think anything like that. I just think that when different species of animals, maybe they see or hear and think, oh, they're like us too, or I don't know. Who knows? But I'm glad to hear that other people are at least saying it, because that's just how you have to do it. Some of it's going to sound stupid, and as you're saying it to someone, you're going to be like, oh damn, I'm going to sound so stupid right now.
Definitely not, because there's an online blog, it's a cryptozoology blog called cryptomundo.com, like Craig Woolheater. And he's got an article where he even talks about this, and I'll link the article, but there's been at least one BFRO sighting report where a menstruation was involved. It then goes on to talking about how that can attract grizzly bears. People have been, unfortunately, killed by grizzly bears that were in the middle of a menstruation. And then it kind of ties back into, you were wondering, like, if that kind of thing can attract. Well,
I always wonder when you hear David Pilatus he has so much good information on people, like, telling real stories. I think he's such a good example of someone that's going out and getting the stories and leaving them to do their own work by just telling the story. And a lot of these people that are having experiences, like, some of them, they're not saying what they're seeing. They're not looking at an ape. And I always wondered, are we going the wrong way when we think that? You know what I mean? I know that sounds so vague, but maybe they're not as much ape or human at all. Maybe, I don't know. I always wonder, because people are like, oh, they're just ape men out in the woods and stuff. And I mean, I've been to zoos and seen monkeys and chimpanzees and stuff like that.
I have a question about your partner during the second encounter. Did she believe in Bigfoot before?
Oh yeah. The
Okay.
funny thing about me and her dad, we had so many talks about, he was really big into Bigfoot and stuff. He was always talking about books that he was reading and new angles on the Patterson Gimlin film and stories from here, the skunk ape stories and stuff. And he was always giving me his opinion on what he thought things were. And she was always part of that by default, by osmosis, by him just wanting to learn about it. And she spent, in all due respect, more time in the woods than I ever have. And she just was one of those people, her family, they grew up just being in the woods and around animals all the time. And I knew that everyone thought that like we were all crazy for having this talk. But the funny thing about you asking about this is that we never felt strange for going up to her dad and saying, guess what? And guess what happened to us? It wasn't like that. I was like, we just saw one. He was always looking in the woods for stuff, and he's never had any experiences really that I knew of, but he always felt like he was on the trail of it somewhere and always collecting stories as he could find them and stuff. But we were excited to tell him because he just always believed in it and stuff like that too. He had guys that he'd work with breaking horses and doing many other things that had experiences in the woods that he said that percent, like he knew that it existed. It was just something that I think that there is a lot more people that considered it something that lives and breathes and exists than we know of. And I think that's works out to our favor. I think that more people are becoming open to saying like stories that have became like a family story, something that happened to grandpa.
Sure,
they don't want people things like that, or dad didn't want to say anything about this during the war or something. You get these guys coming back from places like Vietnam having, like with the rock ape story, having fights with these giant rock apes and stuff. Like we're always trying to, hear cool stories about stuff like that. But no, we were very hip to, learning about Bigfoot or UFOs or trying to get the information at least, because all you can do is get the information and kind of sort through.
So
like
the
a
conversation
lot of
with her father, that turned out okay. That didn't go sideways or anything. Wow.
You in the least bit surprised. As tough as they were, or I shouldn't say are, like, and the kind of terrain that they'd been through on horseback and the stuff that they'd put me through in the woods for fun with them on horseback, I know how tough they are. Like it didn't surprise him or freak him out or anything like that. He knew what everybody could handle. They are very tough people and really good with animals. And I don't know, I guess I can understand, like with some people being like, oh, would you be freaked out to say something? I was psyched because something you could actually say, look, I've got something to say. This is awesome. This has some weight. I know you've got stories, but guess what? And guess who was with me? Just to have somebody corroborate. And
right.
A lot of times things happen and you're obviously nobody ever has a camera conveniently or whatever. However that always works. It's just the roll of the dice. It makes all kinds of times on the boat I can't get my phone out to take a picture of a big ass lobster or a shark or something because my hands are wet. It just works like that sometimes. But that
is one of the most interesting stories. And after, let's say there's that night you left, did you go back the next day to look around the area to see if you could find any evidence or anything like that?
No, I didn't. After that, I kind of joked about going up to that spot with myself. I just, maybe I should just go for a drive up there and just take a look. And I'd gone up that way a little bit for a couple jobs I was doing, and I could never really find it in myself for a reason to want to go back out there. Not because I felt like there was going to be something waiting for me or that I'd even get any resolve from it, because it was in the middle of a field at this weird concrete desk that's if they literally made a child's desk for like middle school out of concrete. It was the most absurdly weird thing. It was like a modern art piece, like from like someplace in Seattle or something. It was just obnoxiously weird. And it just, I just never, I knew that if I went back and tried to find some answers, they wouldn't be there because that's just how it would have worked. I knew that it was just going to be gone like anywhere else. And that place that I lived up in the town of Mesa, I just had to live there. It was just part of living there. I just always was sketched out about being there, and we didn't live there for long, and I didn't. It was a long commute, so I was able to get out of that pretty quickly. But it always left just a weird feeling about just being around there. There was just something like that. You just don't feel like you have, like you. Something like that can overpower you, and it takes you down a notch knowing that something like that is around and close. It's not like being in bear country or anything like that. It's something that's conscious on a different level than something that, like a bear. This can problem solve apparently, and it just left a weird, I hate to say like a weird dark energy, because it wasn't that. It was more just being freaked out about feeling like all of a sudden this place way up in the mountains I thought was a nice little secluded little cabin, nice little place to rent with a nice little cottage, have a little corral just in case, you get a horse or something. And it just put it like a stain on it, where just like I really felt like it wasn't safe in the place that you wanted to have a home at. So I just was ready to go. I spend enough time in the woods and stuff where it's like, even if you wanted to go back to some of these spots, I feel like you just got to do it by chance to be lucky. I felt like if I ever looked at it like I wanted to see something or find something, it wouldn't work that way. That's if I buy the lottery ticket, guaranteed gonna lose. Doesn't work that way for me. So it has to on the fly and just has to come to me in some weird way. And that was really hoping that now that I'm out here in Maine, like I could start talking with some people about any experiences that they'd have. And hearing that story from the guy who cuts wood up north of here, like that was really encouraging to hear. That's what made me decide I've got to at least send an email and at least say something, because that's somebody I could literally I bet you I cut trees and with people that know who that is. I bet you I can figure out who it is and probably sit down and talk with them if they wanted to. You know what I mean? And that makes me feel good to know that people that are having real experiences like that. And like I said, I'm only, I'm just a guy on a pod who's talking to you on a podcast about a story that I've had. Like, it's only as real as it is to us, to our mind and how we accept it. And, I feel like, that story right there, knowing that I could literally, probably if I wanted to, if they were accepting of it, sit down and talk about it. Like, I want to, that made me want to make sure that more people could feel that way. Like, more people were going to start saying these experiences that, that story in particular, I know all about that wild that country is. And I've always joked about wanting to go up there and cut wood, but I don't know if I'm man enough. There's some tough country up there too. Maine is a lot more wild than people think it is. That's for sure.
Maine is crazy, but it's awesome. I would feel that if you keep asking up there, you're gonna run into some stories, no doubt.
Oh, I've heard people talk about seeing big cats in the state. Like, I used to fish off a boat in Addison. We call this down East Maine where I'm at now, and like I live in down East Maine and I work on Mount Desert Island, and I used to fish farther from here at what they call down east towards Addison. Long drive, and I was going to the boat one morning and we seen just a big giant cat out here, and they'd never seen big like mountain lions out here. And I'm like, geez, if I was a mountain lion in Maine, all the granite, oh man, this would be a great place. I'd be here. It is pretty cold though. I don't know. Did you ever come up to Maine at all?
Yeah, definitely. So I grew up in Western Massachusetts in a town called Northfield. So we would vacation.
Oh, nice.
We've done the whole kind of Bunkport thing, Camden, Kittery. We've also gone hiking up near not actual Katahdin, but like the base of Katahdin,
Oh,
had
nice.
a run-in with a moose and his family
Oh, no.
there when I was about 11 or 12 in my family. That's another story. But yeah, that whole Maine area is wild. And especially when you get up, you go north up by the Canadian border, it gets crazy up there. But there are some really interesting Bigfoot things that come up in Maine. There's this one story you should look up. I believe it's called the Medibemps Howler. That's a fun one to look up. There's not a lot about it, but
I think I've actually seen that on someone's channel, and because I on YouTube, like Bob Gimlin. He's a great one. Sasquatch, Les Stroud. Like I love Les. I like his work, and I think he's a very credible, respectful man. I think he goes about it very professionally, very respectfully. He is definitely. I think that his experience in Alaska, like I thought that was really. You'd figure that people that spend their lives in all kinds of jungles and countries would come back with all kinds of stories. Sometimes it just doesn't happen. Like that's when you're literally not paying attention or something. Yeah, but there is some good information out there. And one of those guys on one of those channels it was the Medibemps Howler, right?
Medibemps Howler. I want to say it might have been on. There's an old site called bigfootencounters.com. You would love it. You should check it out.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, it's got some really great old stories and accounts. Old researcher Bobby Short, who's unfortunately not with us anymore, but bigfootencounters.com is great to check out.
Oh, I'm going to have to check that out. Thank you for letting me know.
Yeah.
There's always like the Rocky Mountain Bigfoot organization was one of the first places when I was younger and this happened that I like started trying to put my story in. And in all fairness, like only in the past couple of years have I even decided to actually, probably in the past 8 years, I decided to actually get a smartphone. Like never wanted a computer, never wanted email addresses or any of that stuff. And so like now I'm actually like trying to find a lot of this information. Actually finding some good stuff, and wouldn't have found you or any of that stuff any other way. And I'm glad that there is such a good, easy route to do that. And like I said, once again, the platform, it's great to have it, dude. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Dom, I'm so glad that you reached out to me and we were able to chat for a little bit about your encounters. And I hope that you keep in touch. And if you ever run into anything up in Maine, definitely let me know. Or if you ever get back to Colorado and anything out from there, definitely that as well. Here at Bigfoot Society, our goal is to provide a platform for those that have encountered Bigfoot to share their encounter environment. But we need to hear your story. If you've experienced something that you just can't explain, please send me an email at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Then we can start the conversation. And I know a lot of you have not shared your encounter at all. It's been 20 years, and it's time that you get this off your chest, and then you can get some well-deserved rest, because I know you haven't been sleeping. I understand what you're going through, and I appreciate every one of you listening.